Raven-Symoné was 17 when Cheetah Girls first aired in 2003, already a decade into a career that began with a supporting role on The Cosby Show and continued into Hangin' with Mr. Cooper. By the time Disney Channel released the original film, she was one of the network's most bankable young stars, and the movie became something the network hadn't fully anticipated. The highest-rated broadcast or cable movie of that year. 3 years later, the sequel repeated the topping cable ratings across nearly every demographic Disney tracked for kids and girls audiences. That kind of commercial dominance rarely happens twice in a row by accident, and it built a franchise loyalty that outlasted the actress's own willingness to stay inside it. Symoné did not return for the third film, One World, in 2008. She had chosen instead to focus on a solo music career and other projects, a decision that at the time looked like an actress stepping away from a young audience brand to chase something more adult, more hers. The 3 other original Cheetah Girls, Adrienne Bailon, Sabrina Bryan, and Kiely Williams, continued without her, touring as a mest, as a Lugia, is setter Brad, as a Brader alias Barad, tenure, musical act until 2008, when the group itself dissolved. What looked like a minor scheduling gap in a Disney franchise was actually the end of something the 4 of them had built together for 5 years, on screen and off. The years between then and now tell a story less about Cheetah Girls and more about what happens to a child star who keeps working. Symoné starred in a self-titled sitcom, expanded into producing, and returned to Disney Channel in 2017 with Raven's Home, a spin-off of her earlier hit That's So Raven that ran for 6 seasons until 2023. That's a run most actors her age, coming out of Disney Channel in the 2000s, never got. Networks don't typically bring a performer back twice, decades apart, unless the audience data justifies it. Disney's decision to keep circling back to her suggests she became something rarer than a former child star, a recurring, bankable adult presence for a brand built on childhood nostalgia. This month, Disney confirmed that a 4th Cheetah Girls film, titled The Cheetah Girls, Next Gen, has been greenlit for Disney Channel and Disney+, with production beginning in South Africa. The project comes from executive producers Deborah Martin-Chase and Raven-Symoné, with Simon returning to her role as Galleria and Adrienne Bailon returning as Chanel. The choice of location itself is worth sitting with. The earlier films were shot in the US, Spain, and India. Filming this one in South Africa and building a plot around a wildlife sanctuary is a deliberate departure from the franchise's earlier settings, and it signals that Disney wants this installment to read as more global, more grounded than a straightforward nostalgia cash-in. Lynn Whitfield and Laurie Alter are returning as Dorothea and Juanita, and Sabrina Bryan will make a special appearance as Dorinda, a smaller role than her original one, and notable for who is missing from that list. Kiely Williams, who played Aqua in the first 3 films, is not attached to the project at this time, according to Variety's reporting. Disney has not offered a public explanation, and none of the trade coverage has provided one either. It's the kind of absence that a franchise revival usually addresses directly through a quote, a statement, something. Here, there's only silence, which leaves 2 honest possibilities: a scheduling conflict that simply didn't work out, or a decision on one side or the other not to include her. Sophia Bush is set to appear in a supporting role as Jennifer, a character not drawn from the earlier films, which places a recognizable adult actress into new territory rather than reviving an existing part. That's a different kind of casting logic than bringing back Whitfield or Alter. It's Disney signaling to indexing part adult audience, people who grew up with the franchise and now recognize Bush from her own career trajectory, that this film is aimed at them as much as at children discovering Cheetah Girls for the first time. The new cast carries its own weight. Leah Sava Jeffries, known for playing Annabeth Chase in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, has been cast as Faith, Galleria's daughter, alongside Carmen Sanchez as Dior, Chanel's sister, Kayleen Chang as Ruby, and Sophie Lennon as Brooklyn. Kamojelo Ramashala, a South African actor discovered through Disney's global open casting call, will play Kendi. Jeffries brings something specific to this project. She is currently one of the more visible young Black actresses in a major franchise, having weathered a wave of racist harassment following her Percy Jackson casting in 2023, and her presence here places a young performer with an established, occasionally difficult, public profile inside a franchise historically built around Black and Latina girlhood. Disney casting her as the daughter of the character Simo originated isn't incidental. It reads as continuity, both narratively and symbolically, and it puts a young actress who has already survived public scrutiny into a story literally about a new generation stepping into an old spotlight. The film is directed by Bill Woodruff, known more recently for his work on Bridgerton, and written by Kara Holden, Sarah Watson, and Deborah Swisher. 3 credited writers on a Disney Channel film is not unusual for franchise work, where dialogue, structure, and musical sequences are often divided across specialists, but it does suggest a production trying to balance several competing demands at once: nostalgia for adult viewers, freshness for children, and musical sequences that need to function as standalone content on streaming and social platforms. Kyle Hanagami is credited with choreography, and Adrienne Bailon has taken on a co-producer role in addition to reprising Chanel, which marks a shift in her position within the franchise from performer to someone with creative and presumably financial stake in how it turns out. Plot, according to Disney's synopsis, follows Galleria and Chanel traveling to Africa alongside Galleria's daughter Faith and her 3 friends to volunteer at a wildlife sanctuary, where the girls test their friendship, find their voice, and ultimately take the stage as the new Cheetah Girls. It's a plot structure that mirrors the original film's emotional arc almost exactly. Young women finding their voice through friction and music, but transplants it into a setting with obvious conservation messaging built in. Whether that framing was chosen for its thematic resonance with a franchise literally named after an animal, or as a response to Disney's broader recent interest in stories set in Africa, isn't something the available reporting addresses directly. What makes this development notable isn't the plot. Disney has revived musical franchises before, and will again. The same year brought announcements for Camp Rock 3 and Descendants, Wicked Wonderland, part of what industry coverage has described as a deliberate wave of 2000s and 2010s Disney Channel nostalgia programming timed around anniversaries for franchises like High School Musical and Hannah Montana. What's notable is the specific gamble Disney is making on Symoné herself. She is not simply an actress agreeing to reprise a role. She is credited as an executive producer alongside Deborah Martin Chase, the producer behind all 3 original films, which places her on Merge, the business side of a franchise she once walked away from during its second act. That's a different kind of return than an actress simply saying yes to a paycheck. It's a former teenage star, now in her late 30s, taking creative and financial ownership of the thing that made her famous, 23 years after she first put on the costume. There's a pattern worth noticing in Symoné's career choices, one that recurs enough to look less like coincidence and more like a deliberate professional instinct. She left Cheetah Girls at its commercial peak to pursue music and adult work. She came back to Disney Channel with Raven's Home, rather than trying to build an entirely separate adult brand from scratch, the way many former child stars attempt and few manage successfully. And now she's returning, again, not as a performer taking direction, but as someone shaping the production itself. Each of those choices reads, in isolation, like an actress managing a career. Together, they describe someone who has learned that in family entertainment, brand equity built in childhood doesn't disappear with age, it compounds, provided you know when to step back in. Symoné confirmed the news herself, posting a video on Instagram of herself walking on set to the song Strut from the franchise's second film, captioned, "It's happening, and it's CHEETAHHIOS. The choice to announce it herself, ahead of or alongside Disney's official release, is itself a small piece of leverage. She controls the framing of her own comeback rather than waiting for a studio press release to define the narrative for her. Ayo Davis, president of Disney Kids and Family, described the original franchise as being about friendship, music, and empowering young people to use their voice, saying the new cast allows Disney to continue that legacy for a new era of kids and families. Disney has genuine commercial reasons to want this franchise to work again, separate from any nostalgia math. The original Cheetah Girls remains one of the most successful Disney Channel original movie franchises in the network's history, and reviving it during a year the company has already built around anniversary programming for other franchises is a straightforwardly commercial decision. No release date has been set. Filming was scheduled to begin in South Africa this month, with more details expected once production is underway. What remains unclear, and what none of the current reporting addresses, is what happens to the Cheetah Girls brand itself once the 4 young newcomers are introduced to audiences who have never seen the earlier films. Disney is betting that the mechanism which worked in 2003, young women finding their identity through friendship and music, set against an exotic backdrop, still works on a generation raised on short-form video and franchise fatigue. Whether Faith, Dior, Ruby, and Brooklyn become to this generation what Galleria, Chanel, Aqua, and Dorinda were to theirs, is a question the film itself hasn't answered yet, and won't, until it's finished and in front of an audience that didn't grow up waiting for it.